Can we? All right. Well, good morning then, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This was a bit of a testing phase for the sound, but that is, I guess, normal. Let us start. This is the webinar, Moving from Reference Levels to REDD+ Results Reporting. My name is Neeff. I'm a climate change expert with the FAO, and I'm the host today of this webinar. I'm sitting here at FAO's headquarters. There's several of the other speakers sitting around a long table with me over here. And we have several speakers, as you have undoubtedly noticed during the sound check, connected from several remote locations. We have some in Eastern Africa, we have a speaker in South Asia and East Asia, and the participants are certainly connected from many other locations. So this will make for an interesting and exciting discussion. The objective of this webinar is to share lessons learned. The lessons learned on REDD+ results reporting and on REDD+ forest reference emission levels, the relevant submissions, the relevant reports, and the associated review processes, technical analysis, technical assessment processes that have already been carried out. This is a topic that we have at heart in our work on REDD+ capacity development at the FAO. We are deeply involved in the UN REDD program that the FAO participates in, and we also work under several other modalities for capacity development at the country level for REDD+. We believe that it's timely and important to have a discussion about lessons learned and update each other and share more lessons between countries. This is clearly in the context to be seen of a lot of momentum around REDD+ and climate change policy. The Paris Agreement was agreed upon last year and has certainly redefined the context for much of international climate policy and potentially indirectly also for REDD+. There is a lot of additional submissions that have taken place. The last round of submissions has seen as many as 9 additional submissions that came up. The count is now at a total of 15. FAO has been instrumental, we believe, in as many as 5 of those 9 submissions from the last round, and we hope to make similar substantial contributions for a further 8 that we hope will come through during the next rounds of submissions in early 2017. On top of all of these further submissions of forest reference levels, there are the first 3 submissions of REDD+ results reports too, which is of course what we all hope for, that countries begin showing results of their efforts to reduce deforestation. Both of these, the forest reference levels and the results reports, are undergoing processes of technical assessment and technical analysis. A growing number of countries has gone through these processes and have collected experience, and I hope that we can talk about these issues also during the next 90 minutes. And last point that helps to redefine the context for REDD+ and makes it necessary to share more lessons learned and to really engage in more discussion is that there's also increasing momentum around REDD+ outside the context, strictly of the context of the UNFCCC. So there's ever more momentum, for example, under the World Bank's carbon funds or other bilateral initiatives and multilateral initiatives for actually carrying out results-based payments. So this is why we're conducting this webinar today. There are just a few ground rules that I'd like to explain. First thing, this session is recorded. In case you don't feel comfortable with this, now would be the right time to disconnect. Also, I want to clarify that we really hope that everyone will ask questions and participate as much as possible in the discussion. We are a little bit challenged by internet connectivity issues and cannot give every participant speaker rights, at least not using the microphone. But for submitting questions, you can do that in a small text box that you see at the bottom left side of your screen. This is a chat box. Questions can be typed in there at any time. Of course, questions have also been submitted beforehand. I have those here with me, and we will use them. But in case there are questions coming up during the presentations, during the discussions that you'd like to immediately or directly post to the panel, please do that. Please do that. You can already use the chat window at the top, at the bottom left side of the screen now. Okay, with these, those are basically the ground rules. It isn't just yet sit back and relax. What I hope to do is also give everyone a feeling through a small survey, on who is really connected to the webinar at this stage. So please, let's bring up the survey now. You should all be seeing popping up on your screens 4 boxes. And I hope that you can, everyone who's connected, make the appropriate choice and give us an idea of who you are, where you're connected from, and what your focus is. You can already begin voting now. Results will be broadcast in real time. So we're interested to hear where people are based and what they mainly work on. We are interested to get an idea of what kind of organization everyone works at. UN organizations, private sector governments, academia, NGOs. Don't have yet a single vote for an NGOs. The NGOs seem to be a little bit underrepresented this morning. We're interested to get an idea of what your key interest is in participating today. You know, whether it's simply to listen and get an idea of, you know, what the key points for discussion are, or whether you have specific questions that you'd like to ask, pose to the panel, get a feedback on, potentially help discussing. And clearly, it will be interesting to get an idea of how deeply engrossed everyone is in working on REDD+ reference levels. So to which extent people are directly involved in REDD+ reference levels, REDD+ results reports, or to which extent we are more looking into people that chiefly work on other aspects of REDD+ and just try to get a feeling for it. So yes, results stop moving. I can see that here. We have clearly a focus on participants from Asia Pacific and Africa. And that is, of course, the scope of this event. We've had earlier events that focus on Latin America and also on a internal UN audience. So here, this is the session for Asia Pacific and Africa, and the participation that reflects that. In terms of organizations, we have a focus on government people, private sector to some extent, and our colleagues from the UN. Most people have dialed on to listen and update themselves, get an idea of, simply to participate through listening and get an idea of what the key issues are that are being discussed. Only few really hope to ask specific questions. I do have a long list of questions, and I hope that people will engage in the discussion using the chat window at the bottom too. Lastly, most people that have dialed on are actually directly involved in REDD+ reference levels or in REDD+ results reporting. So we have a highly specialized audience here, and that is, of course, in line with our own expectations, where we hope to engage in a really technical discussion about these issues this morning. Let me introduce very quickly the agenda. So if we could bring that up, please. And then I'll stop speaking and hand over to our first speaker. So we are already almost done with the introduction. We will also have for you today a summary on REDD+ results reporting and REDD+ reference levels, as we have seen in the 15 submissions and in the several technical analysis, technical assessment processes that are already ongoing. And Marieke Sandker, who's here with me at the FAO, will talk about this. Afterwards, we will have lessons learned from 3 countries, from Malaysia, from Uganda, and if we get the gentleman from Nepal to log on, I hope that we will also have the presentation from Nepal. And subsequently, we will engage in a technical discussion where we will draw on all those questions that have been submitted beforehand, as well as on questions that you might want to ask while the discussion proceeds. I'm going to stop here. I'm just going to hand over to Marieke Sandker now, who's our first speaker. She's a national of the Netherlands. She is the lead on forest reference levels and REDD+ results reporting at the FAO team that works on capacity development for REDD+. She also has a background where she before that worked at CIFOR and IUCN, but I think today she will mainly talk about her work at the FAO. Marieke, I hand over to you. Please give us an overview of REDD+ results reporting and REDD+ forest reference levels.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Til, for this kind introduction. I hope not to take too much time, so I'm just going to give an overview of the state of affairs on reference level submissions by countries to the UNFCCC and on REDD+ results reporting. So we can take as a starting point under the UNFCCC the Warsaw Framework, because this was really the COP decision where the technical assessment, how this works, who will perform this, what the timeline is, has been decided. So the Warsaw Framework is really the starting point we should look at. And after that, countries have had one deadline a year for submitting a reference level. So the first year has been exceptional. It was 2014. Brazil was the first country to submit a reference level. And Brazil actually asked for a shortened technical assessment process. They had all their information ready, so the Secretariat enabled this for them. And they specifically wanted this to be in line with the decision on the submission of the BUR, which asked countries to submit the first BUR by December 2014. Now, Brazil wanted to include REDD+ results in the technical annex of their BUR. Therefore, they've asked for the shortened submission, because in order to be able to submit results, you need a technically assessed reference level. So June, the first submission, and December, the first technical assessment report for Brazil has been published. And then ever since, so 2015, 16, and 17, the deadline for submission is in January. So in 2015, we've seen another 5 countries submitting a reference level. So it's Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Malaysia, and Mexico. And by the end of the year, so between, say, 9 to 12 months later, the technical assessment reports and the modified submissions have been published on the UNFCCC website. The third round of submissions, where we saw the first African countries also come along, so I'm not going to read out the list. You can see the countries that submitted, which makes the total number of countries 15 now that have submitted a reference level. So the last set of countries, those that submitted in January 2016, are still undergoing the technical assessment of their reference level, and these are expected to be published. The technical assessment reports are expected to be published towards the end of the year. Okay, so the next step after a country has a technically assessed reference level is that a country can submit REDD+ results to actually show emission reductions against their technically assessed reference level. So as already said on the previous slide, the first country to do so was again Brazil in December 2014, and the technical, the REDD+ results undergo a different process. It's an international consultation and analysis process where there is a technical analysis of the REDD+ results reported, which are published again in a technical report. So for Brazil, it's the first and only country right now who have a technical report published. So the second and third country to submit was Colombia and Malaysia, who submitted their REDD+ results early this year, and they're currently undergoing a technical analysis. Okay, so just this slide is just to indicate that it doesn't stop with the publication of a technical assessment report or a technical report. This is really an iterative process. So once the REDD+, the reference level submission and the technical assessment report has been published, REDD+ results can be submitted as a next process. And after that, a country can submit another reference level with other activities, or in case it was a subnational, they can submit for other regions, or even they can submit an updated reference level if they have new and better data which has become available. All of this does require some planning for the country, because if you want to submit your results at a certain point, you need to be sure that by that time you have a technically assessed reference level, and you need to be sure that your BUR is submitted at that time, because you cannot submit it separate from the biannual updated report. It's okay. Okay. So I'll just give a brief overview of what choices countries have made so far in their reference levels. So far, as you can see, the dark blue is what the countries that have included this specific REDD plus activity. The most common activity which is included is deforestation. In many countries, this is the most significant REDD plus activity, and it's the most, let's say, easy to measure. So most reliable information can be collected on this. We can see forest degradation, restoration, and enhancement are much more challenging. Some countries have attempted this, though, in different ways. So, for example, on degradation, we have Guyana is missing here. We have Guyana and Congo that used proxy data, so they used timber records for assessing degradation. Vietnam, Chile, and Indonesia are the first ones to actually use remote sensing to assess degradation. Then the very rare activities to be included is sustainable management of forest and conservation, which only a few countries have included. And sometimes this requires additional administrative information on the type of management. Okay, then on the method chosen, we can see that 1 out of 3 submissions propose an adjustment. It should be said, though, that Peru and Vietnam, they're listed here under the adjusted historical averages. That's a little bit debatable because Vietnam actually for deforestation and degradation is using a historical average. They're only proposing an adjustment for enhancements since they've done a lot of reforestation efforts in the past. And Peru is an extrapolation of the trend. So this is also dubious whether this is considered an adjustment or not. It could also be considered entirely based on historical data. And then just a brief overview of the choice of the historical periods in the reference level and the validity period or the REDD plus results reporting periods. As you can see, this slide just shows that there's a very large variety, and that's mainly due to the fact that the UNFCCC does not actually provide any specific guidance on what historical period to choose. Now, just as a rough comparison, if we look at, for example, the methodological framework for the FCPF, this does provide specific guidance. It should be around 10 years. With justification, you can go up to 15 years, and it should end near the year 2013. So that means that most of the countries here which have periods going far left of far before the year 2000 would not be acceptable under the MEF framework. Another interesting thing to note here is that Chile is using 2 different historical periods for deforestation and degradation. This is logical because it depends on the kind of information. Usually countries do not have a similar long time series for degradation as they have for deforestation. So just a few words on the REDD plus results reporting. They are reported in a technical annex to the BUR, as already said before. What is a biannual updated report? It's a report which gives an update on national greenhouse gas inventory. It provides information on mitigation actions and the need and support received. And then optionally, a country can provide a technical annex to this report, which provides the REDD plus results. The objective of the BUR submissions is to increase the transparency of mitigation actions and their effects. So with this objective, there's an international consultation and analysis process which exists of 2 components. There's the technical analysis and there's the facilitative sharing of views. Now, the facilitative sharing of views, the first session took place earlier this year, and it's separate from the technical analysis sessions. The outcomes is a summary report for the main contents of the BUR and a technical report specifically for the technical analysis of the REDD+ results. Just two more words here. The technical analysis of REDD+ results, really the main focus is on looking on a consistency between the REDD+ results and the reference level and trying to assess whether the results are accurate. A brief overview here of the REDD+ results reported so far. So we have different methodologies. Brazil has this dynamic mean where the historical period is always extending. They always go back to the year 96. Colombia is using a constant mean, and Malaysia is using what we call a rolling mean. It means it uses the same period, the same 14-year period, and it shifts this every 5 years for updating. You can see the accounting periods also, 5-year used by both Brazil and Malaysia, Colombia 2 years. And that's just to give you a sense of what countries have submitted so far. So what is next? Many countries that submitted their reference levels and REDD+ results specifically state that it's in the context of finance. So the official financing mechanism of the UNFCCC is the Green Climate Fund. Many countries, and actually everybody, is looking at the Green Climate Fund right now to see if there are an additional set of rules for payments to actually start to happen. So that's what we're all looking at right now, and that's where I want to hand it back to Till.
Thank you, Marieke. Thank you, Marieke. Excellent. This is very interesting to listen to you and to get this complete overview. It's just very interesting to see basically the cross section across these 15 submissions of reference levels and 3 submissions of REDD+ results report that we have on the table. That is a fantastic overview, and I'm sure we'll make for a very interesting discussion. But let us dive a little bit deeper into one of our countries, and I'll hand over to Elizabeth Phillip now. Elizabeth, if you would please activate your microphone now, and then give us our presentation. You do not need to move the slides yourself. We do that for you. You will just need to say next slide then, and we move it on. But please activate your microphone now. We cannot hear you yet. Elizabeth, if you would please.
Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Activated already?
Let me also
okay.
Just one thing that I wanted to say before you start, which is just for everyone's benefit. I asked Liz for a sentence to introduce her, and we all know that she's the brain behind Malaysia's REDD+ reference level, as well as the results report in Malaysia. Is a trailblazer in this, being one of only 3 countries that has done this. But what she told me is, it's a beautiful sentence that I just wanted to read out for everyone. Liz says, the awe of the natural ecosystem is close to Elizabeth's heart, and she sees that implementing REDD+ will further enable it to sustain it at its best. Liz, that is a very beautiful mission statement for yourself, so to speak. So excellent. Looking forward to a very nice presentation from you, Anne. Liz, over to you, please.
Thank you, Till, and a very good morning to all of you in the other part of the world. In my part of the world, it's coming towards the end of our working day. In an hour's time, or in an hour and a half time, we'll be closing for the day. So it's evening in our part of the world. I also want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our experience, because Malaysia is always not in the limelight when it comes to REDD+. So we are excited to share our experience. Thank you, Till. Next, please. Next, please. Can you hear me? Okay. As Marieke had mentioned, we submitted our reference level in December 2014 because that was the deadline to submit. So there was a ceremony during the REDD Day in Lima, and we submitted ours. This is just a picture, just to refresh our memories. and we submitted on forest management. I'll tell you why in a bit. Next, please. Next, please.
It should be up there.
Okay. And we also submitted our results base as an annex to our BUR that was submitted early this year. I'm just giving you the 6 chapters and the 2 technical annexes that we have submitted, just to give you an idea where is our REDD+ results base. We had 2 technical annexes, a little bit different from many countries. The first one was providing the greenhouse gas inventory, and then the second one is the REDD+ results base. Why we did this? Because I generally work on the inventory for my country and I spearhead that, so we wanted transparency. So that's the reason why we did that, thinking it was useful for the different groups of people who want to see and understand how do we frame our inventory chapter. Next, please. So REDD+ implementation in Malaysia, unlike our neighbors, those of you who are familiar with me would hear me say always that our neighbors up north and south, east and west had always been attracting REDD+ funds. Malaysia unfortunately did not attract donors or any REDD+ funds. The reason being, one donor told us that our emissions were too small to even consider Earth, and our potential reductions were even smaller. So it was quite disappointing at that point in time, but we quickly recovered and picked ourselves up, and we looked within ourselves, and what we did was basically to build on what we have. So we built on our short-term and long-term policies that we had. The first long-term policy that we have is to maintain at least 50% of our land mass forested. And we have been maintaining this with a lot of challenges for us, because forest is always sacrificed in the name of development. So there's always a fine balance. And because of this challenge, we have in 1995 onwards looked at forests differently. What we are framing our forests now is basically to see it from a commodity perspective, to look at it as a natural capital. So it was useful for us to look at it from that perspective and to change the mindset of our fellow policy makers as well as politicians, that forest is just not for timber. So we have some achievement there, and we think that is our leverage to now implement REDD+. So this ties in very well with our REDD+ strategy. And along this line, there was 2 big programs that the government of Malaysia had implemented and is still implementing. One is the Central Forest Pine. If you know, Malaysia has got 2 sites, the Peninsular site and 2 more states in the Borneo Island. So we have in the Peninsular Malaysia, we are trying to develop connectivity from north to south, east to west, and we call that the Central Forest Pine program. And the heart of Borneo, that's between 3 countries, all the Borneo countries, all the countries in the Borneo Island. So they are trying to develop connectivity between the forests. So the Malaysian component is about 6 million for the heart of Borneo and about 5.2 million the Central Forest Pine. So we built on that first. Then we looked at our existing systems. What do we have? So we have forest management that we have implemented since 1905, and we had the criteria and indicators, or the forest certification, the first pilot in 1997. So we have built upon that, and we looked how can we further enhance our forest management. And we also have forest monitoring system. We started off from the peninsula, and then we moved to the Borneo side. Because the way our constitution was negotiated and now implementing is the Bornean states have flexibility in all their implementation. And also another point to remember is land is under the purview of the subnational government. So it's managed at the subnational. So the federal government would not have a direct say except developing policies and framing policies and guiding implementation plans. So because budget was a limitation or a serious limitation for us, we always had to look at cost-effective measures. The first question when we bring up to our policymakers or our politicians is, what's the cost? Is it useful to us? So we were always stretched to look at the most cost-effective measures. So we are always envious when we look at our neighbors building big systems and we are struggling with our systems. And finally, as I said this, that most of all our activities are built on national funds. We don't have any external funds at this point in time. Next, please. And how did we construct our forest reference level? We looked at our forest reference level. We looked at our forest definition. So in Malaysia, our forest definition follows our land use zoning and the associated laws or acts or legislation and regulation. So for us, we had followed the Kyoto Protocol submission because it took us like 6 months to get this consultation through, and so we stick to that. 30% of canopy cover, 5% at maturity, and 0.5% hectares. And we had always worked very closely with the inventory team, that being me. So I knew what was happening in the LULUCF sector, so it was easy to actually build the bridge with the REDD+ technical people. So they all knew, and it was a very consultative process, so it's transparent at national and subnational level. So we had very consistent data sets between the inventory and our REDD+ reference level construction. I also need to mention this. Oil palm and rubber in the Malaysian context is not a forest, even though it could meet the threshold of forest. It is considered a cropland. So the management is totally different from what is prescribed under the National Forestry Act. So under the National Forestry Act, we only have two types of forests, the protected forest, protected areas, and the permanent reserved forest. So all the other forest-like areas are not considered forests because they are not under the National Forestry Act. We do account them, but the forestry departments do not manage this forest, and they are usually the state land and alienated land. So these are land banks for future development, and often plans are already in place to develop these areas. Next, please. So with that background, why did we choose to submit sustainable management of forests? Because our technical people at the subnational level felt very confident with their figures and what is happening in the forest areas that they manage. So they were not very comfortable to include the areas that did not fall under the purview of the National Forestry Act. And we didn't have good monitoring system outside these areas. And we were not confident to actually look at whether these areas were really deforested. So we still have that question mark. And the last 7 years, we were actually looking at how to improve this. And we started working on this in 2008 after we completed our second national communications. And then we found it was useful for us to look at really understanding our land use, and we started that project from then, and we only completed it last year. So now we have a better picture of what is our forest boundaries, especially the areas that is not under the Forest Act. So because of that, we have decided to just use forest management. And we had funds for this because the 10th Malaysia Plan, when we submitted this, it was the 10th Malaysia Plan, valuing our environmental endowments, where we want to enhance forest management towards a low carbon economy and sustainable development, meeting our sustainable development goals. And forest conservation was something that was flagged explicitly in this plan. So that was the reason why we built this. Next, please. So going back to our experience, we have undergone, I would say, 1.5. We have gone through the technical assessment for the reference level, and we have gone through the ICA process. We have not completed it. I think by this week we would get our report. And what is our experience from this whole process? What I would sum up is basically it was a very useful interaction, and as I was telling some of my friends 3 weeks ago in Mongolia, basically because we did it ourselves, we understood what was our reference level, what was our inventory for the LULUCF sector, so we could really explain to our best to the reviewers what did we do, how did we do this, and why did we do this. I think that was quite clearly done, and sometimes when the reviewers were asking us for clarification on to do this would be easy, you just do it like this. Why can't you track deforestation? Why Malaysia has challenged looking at deforestation? And we could explain it's because of the legislation of this country that has prevented us to just simply easily just develop deforestation. So I mean, we could explain, and we hope we have explained it well. I think we explained it during the ICA process, during the technical assessment process. This was the problem, and we could overestimate our deforestation reference emissions level if we construct. So that was a very good interaction we had. We actually built the capacity of our technical experts, because some small things we overlooked, and that helped. And one simple thing that I would like to share, it's a funny story, but it's the truth. We used the IPCC 2006 guidelines software, and that software had a bug. And we did not realize the software had a bug in it, because there was a column to show to include your litter production. So so we were looking at it, and we thought that it was included in the calculations. Then when we teased that out, it was not included in the calculations. I mean, that was one. And the other thing that built instant capacity of our local experts was, unlike the inventory process, they think that is the federal government's responsibility. REDD+ is at subnational, they should be building it. So we had 3 different sets of spreadsheets, and it was quite difficult at federal level for us to actually merge them together and to really understand this. So after that, what they have learned is, the next time when we do our technical assessment, we will have one spreadsheet. So that is an instant learning lesson, learning for our experts, and that was really a good opportunity for us to really engage in this process. We were also able to reflect a little bit on our national circumstances, and also to reflect a little bit on the UNFCCC decisions, because Malaysia has interpreted it this way, but our AT and TTE we don't know about TTE yet, but our assessment team may not have interpreted the decisions the same as we did. So it was quite an interesting exchange too, to see how decisions were interpreted. So it was a very useful experience, and that was one of our motivations for Malaysia to actually submit our reference level, because we wanted to learn from the experience and then to improve from that, and to build upon this. So we think we have achieved our personal objective. And then transparency is a big word. Of course, it's a long word, but how many people really understand? And what is transparent to Malaysia? And Malaysia thinks this information is too mundane. It's reported everywhere. Everybody knows, so we don't have to include this information. Whereas the AT or the TTE thinks those are useful information to be included. So that's also another useful way of looking at how we have learned to understand what is the expectations of the people outside Malaysia. And during our stakeholder consultations, we were saying, no, we understand this. Now we need to also include this. So that was also a very good learning experience for us. And as I said, we made some mistakes, big and small, and we also corrected those mistakes. And we were also able, I think the most important experience that we had is implementation challenges versus IPCC guidance. IPCC guidelines gives you a very it gives you a very generalized guideline, and then how do you take this and how do you implement this? So this is where we see the difference between a reviewer, and an assessment team that has ground experience versus a review team that has good understanding of the IPCC guidelines. Next, please. Next, please.
We are running a little bit over time. Sorry about this.
Yes,
let's cut it.
Next, please.
Cut it short, the conclusion, if that's all right.
It is the last slide. Okay, and our final reflection is, we had a question that is still not solved, is what is significant emissions? And we also have some perception in the sense that should all countries do deforestation, or do all countries need to do all five activities, or just one activity? With that, that's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. This is fascinating to listen to you. I'm a little bit, it's a bit of a pity that I'm the moderator today and not only comment on a lot of things that you said. It's fascinating. As I said before, we look at Malaysia as being one of the trailblazers of this process. One of the first countries to submit the reference level, one of the first countries to submit results reports. So excellent. I particularly enjoyed some of the points that you made regarding the technical analysis and technical assessment processes, and how this is an opportunity to learn and improve, and how transparency can mean a lot of things. And one of the things that I strongly believe in is that trust is important, trust between countries, and that only through building that mutual trust through the technical analysis and technical assessment processes can we ultimately make a larger contribution, well, to improving forest management not only in individual countries but at a global level. So some of the points that you made have a lot of echo on my own side. But what I want to do now is I want to hand over to Uganda. I want to hand over to Xavier Mugumya, who's connected. Would you please activate, Xavier, we want to hand over to you now and invite you to please share some of the experiences that Uganda is making in the preparation of the REDD+ reference level. Please activate your microphone if you haven't done so yet. I can't hear you yet.
Now, can you hear me?
Please activate your microphone. You will not need to move the slides.
Yes.
We can do that.
Can you hear me?
But please activate your microphone now. There is a microphone button at the top left side of your screen. In case it... No, we can hear you are. Xavier, excellent. Please say something. Xavier? Excellent, excellent. Okay, so Xavier is the person that coordinates climate change issues at Uganda's National Forest Authority. He is also the alternate national REDD+ focal point for Uganda. He has 25 years of working experience in forest resource management.
Through you, can I
part of that on issues related to climate change.
The international presenter and the lady Liz from Malaysia. These are extremely good exchanges. I would like to share with you what we are doing, but to start with a caveat that we do not have a reference level which is completed yet. We are working on that subject, and therefore my experience is more related on the process than on the international interaction with the assessments. Next. Yes, so we have two important motivations as a country. Of course, we must comply with the international obligation under the UN, but also we hope through it we can be able to access other resources available in the other fora, for example, the World Bank and any others that may come in. But the biggest and the greatest motivator for our country on preparing the reference level is provide the evidence that our decision makers require, especially our finance requires and our electorate and politicians require, and also to convey almost the same message that Malaysia has conveyed from commoditization of forestry into natural capital, which is natural infrastructure. And then our submission is that we are closely linked to the National Forest Monitoring System. So the work for reference levels is closely linked and completely intertwined between the two. Next. So we are walking through those building blocks, and on each we have some status which I wanted just to share with you. Next. So on forest definition, we have gone for 30%, 1 hectare and 4 meters, and we have agreed that we shall safeguard other aspects of our forestry in the country which is not included in that definition. On the activity data, we are almost through with the analysis of those series, and we are now doing the assessment on accuracy. And also, the initial emission factors were also done, and we also had some existing equations, but we are refining some of them as well. Next. Yes, our interest is that all activities for REDD as agreed in Cancun are eligible, but not necessarily that all of them will be submitted in their initial submission. We are going to use discretion, and that's what we are discussing at the country level on which of the initial activities to start with. The pools, again, we are better off starting with the most obvious ones, and with improvement we shall also add on the other complicated ones. And the same thing with gases, we are starting with carbon dioxide, and we shall add on other gases as we gain the capacity to report on them. And then on the scale, because of the size of our country, we think we don't need to subdivide the country, so we are representing the whole country at the same level. And on the methodology for the construction, we are still discussing as a country on the period to use and on which of those periods to convey to which audience. And also, we are looking on where to segregate or aggregate our forest units, either by ownership or tenure. And also, we are discussing intensely the possibilities on what adjustments to accommodate. Next. Yeah, as I mentioned, there is a strong link between our reference level and the National Forest Monitoring System, and therefore we work together. The both units are working together. So again, we are looking at those technical pillars for our National Forest Monitoring System, and we also have some status to share. Next. So for the monitoring functions, we are expecting that they will also, our monitoring system, our National Forest Monitoring System will also serve to do the traditional monitoring of the strategy options, or whatever we shall have agreed in the benefit or safeguards, or the guidelines that we are preparing for the activities that will be done at our subnational levels. And for the measurement, reporting, and verification components, we are working through the 4 pillars, and on the activity data, we have completed the series. We are working with the actual assessment, but intermediate, we are discussing on the possibility for having a reliable satellite monitoring system that could support us over a long time to allow for the periodic activity data capture. Next. On the forest inventory, we are almost completing our first component of the forest assessment, both for the biomass as well as for the traditional national forest inventory, which will be the basis for our first submission. But we also already have the plan to expand the coverage and to also increase the different categories of land and trees. And we also want to increase our capacity to estimate emissions from degradation, harvested wood products, and soils. Next. On the greenhouse gas inventories, our contribution so far has been the provision of the data which is going to be used in our third national communication. But in the long term and intermediate, we are looking at the data which will be used for our first bulls, and also which will be used for our subsequent national communication. Next. So on institutional arrangements, we regard this one as one of the most crucial components of our national forest monitoring system. So currently, we already, at the national level, the greenhouse gases system, we are working on institutionalization of the different institutions and actors and how they could work together to deliver on the greenhouse gas inventory. But also on the REDD, in particular, we already have a measurement reporting and verification platform of willing institutions who are contributing information for our REDD reference level. And also we have started discussions on the web portal architecture, and we are discussing on content and administration for that web portal. And the long term, it is to complete that institutionalization and integration of REDD with the national greenhouse gas institutions and to clarify the roles and, if required, to enter into relationships that are slightly more binding than the current voluntary ones. And then to continue with the capacity support institutions, especially increase the capacity to do more greenhouse gas assessments for all the subsector, and also to have expertise to participate in the international UNFCCC assessments. Next. I think this was our last slide, and so because it's a process, this is what we can share for the time being, and I thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. And it is very interesting to listen to you. And Uganda is working with a team of the FAO also on that REDD plus reference level. And we are all very grateful for the opportunity to provide support there. Listening to you, it sounds a little bit like it's almost like a manual for REDD plus reference level construction and presentation. So that is extremely useful. Thank you very much for sharing this morning. What I'd like to do is I'd like to move over to our third country example. And we have Dr. Murthy in the line. Dr. Murthy in the line, who will present the example of Nepal. We've had a little bit of issues regarding the sound check because of internet connectivity problems. Let's try again now, whether we can hear Dr. Murthy. Please unmute your microphone now. We have already given you microphone rights. Dr. Murthy, able to hear you now? Yes, I can hear some faint noises in the line.
Yeah, good morning. You are able to listen?
There you go. Excellent.
Good morning,
excellent.
Murthy here.
There you are. We can hear you well as long as you speak slowly. And I also want to quickly say that Dr. Murthy has support. He is not on the line alone, but he will present the case of Nepal together with Mohan Budel, who is the coordinator of Nepal's REDD plus reference level process. Mr. Budel is logged on from Nepal, but Dr. Murthy is logged on from India, from what I understand. Either way, the two of them have, from what I understand, worked very closely together, or are working very closely together on the REDD plus reference level construction in Nepal, as well as Nepal's results reporting. Dr. Murthy will give this presentation, and Dr. Budel will help answering questions. He has 25 years of experience in remote sensing on forestry, land cover change analysis, forest biomass assessment, national and community forest monitoring, really covering, it seems, all the different boxes that are relevant for the MRV class. Dr. Murthy, your microphone is activated okay. You don't need to move the slides. We will do that for you. I will be very interested and curious to listen to the presentation about the case of Nepal now. Please go ahead. Thank you. And I hope that while speaking, you may also be able to actually address one of the questions that we have had. There was a person that asked why there are no countries yet from South Asia that have submitted voice reference levels or REDD plus results reports. Maybe while you speak, you would be able to also answer this question for us. Dr. Murthy, please go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. I am audible? Shall I continue?
Speak strongly, please.
Is that okay
Dr.
now?
Murthy, yes, you are audible. You just need to speak slowly and strongly. We will hear you well. If it's not good enough, I will interrupt you.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I will be presenting on behalf of Nepal the progress and the concept of FRL assessment. Can I go to next slide? So today, as on latest assessment of government of Nepal, forest covers 5.96 million hectares, which covers around 40% of the geographical area of the country. In addition, we have around 3.74% of trees outside the forest area, and very good number of tons of per hectare carbon stock exists. One of the important feature in the country, if you see on the right side of the slide, the entire country, which is Himalayan mountain, is divided into 5 physiographic regions. Each region has a different context in terms of carbon content, in terms of its biodiversity value, in terms of human pressure and carbon extractions. Therefore, it is a bigger challenge to understand and assessment of the reference emission levels across these physiographic regions is one of the primary challenge governing the reference emission levels. In addition to that, if you see from on a north to south, you can see 5 development regions. These development regions also implies different management scenarios, which again regulates the forest condition and forest growth in terms of organized and unorganized extractions, resulting into different levels of emissions. And therefore, here itself we can imagine how complex to get a national reference emission levels emerging from physiographically different stratification regimes and also management context-wise regimes. Therefore, we are considering these natural and management units and how best we bring them in their subnational assessments, and also to bring a scalability into the national assessment. Can I go to the next slide? And before we started looking into the FRL assessment, we also assessed where we are standing in terms of our monitoring systems and available data. If you see, there are pretty good number of assessments done since 1964 to 2014. Around 4 assessments are done at national level, both for the forest cover mapping and also growing stock assessment. But one of the challenges with these data sets, they are from different sources, scales and the sampling designs are different, and this has made us to have a big difficulty in bringing out a scalable and comparable assessments. So then what we are trying to do, I will explain in the subsequent slides. But recent past, government of Nepal has undertaken good national forest inventory, which has given very good emission factor information in terms of root shoot ratios, specific gravity, the mean annual increment kind of information is nationally specific information is also collected. At the same time, considering the similar ecological zones prevailing in countries, neighboring countries like India and Bhutan, we are also trying to get similar such equations and emission factor data specific to based on the forest types, so that our level of quality of emission information, factor information increases. And we are also happy to say that the detailed forest type stratification maps are available, which were prepared using latest Landsat seasonal Landsat TM data of 30-meter resolution, and also 1400 field sample points, which essentially gives you tree species information. So there is a detailed forest type information is also available, and the latest inventory is 2010 to 2014. At the same time, we have a very good amount of census data at sub-district level for 2000 and 2010 also digitally available. Next slide, please. And if you see in the context of REDD+, one of the most intriguing factors for us is how important is the deforestation and degradation. Looking at whatever the inconsistencies in the databases of forest cover present, we have noticed the deforestation rates are comparatively far low very low. And however, we felt the degradation is going to be a bigger challenge. And our presumption has been further strengthened using latest Department of Forest national survey which is conducted during 2010 and 2014. These results came out from around 1800 field sample points collected by the government of Nepal. If you look at this slide, out of the 1800 sample field plots, 67% of the field plots reported grazing as one of the biggest disturbance in these areas. Next to that, if you see the cutting, either tree cutting or the leaf cutting or lopping is found in almost 70% of the field plots. This shows that the grazing and the tree cutting or the harvest, whether organized or unorganized, definitely have an impact in terms of degradation, and there is no specific national sampling design.
Dr. Murthy, sorry for interrupting you. This is Till. I'm afraid that we won't be able to move through all the slides. I'm already realizing. Why don't you take another few minutes to focus on the most important points? That might be a very good strategy. If you just take another 3 minutes and select the most important points, then we could take it from there. And maybe I might also invite your colleague, Dr. Pudel, to also add a word or two. But please try to focus on the two or three most important.
Okay. And then, from this, the community forestry in the Nepal is very critical and well known worldwide. And we need to see how community forestry regulates our emission levels. Then considering this, next slide please. And based on the previous background, it has been decided that the wood removals and grazing are the critical factors of the degradation to be estimated, and how increased stock contributes to the enhancement of the forest carbon stock, apart from the deforestation and reforestation. So we have only one subnational assessment done in the country. Therefore, considering the databases available, we started with a national assessment. For this movement, the above ground and below ground biomasses are considered, and carbon dioxide is considered as one of the major gases, and 2000 and 2010 period is taken as the reference for the assessment. Next slide. And we have using the consistent digital classification method, we have done the 2000 and 2010 land cover assessment, and the definition of forest is greater than 1 hectare with 10% tree canopy coverage. Fortunately say that around 2000 field sample plots are there for ground verification, and we are also using 25% of the forest area is we are having 1 meter Google Earth information to assess the change accuracy. So that way we are better placed in terms of our accuracies. Next slide please. And these are the definitions globally accepted. Can you go next slide? And considering there is no consistent time profile measurements are available for the degradation, and having understood that fuel wood extractions are one of the critical factors apart from the timber, we have used wisdom model to estimate the supply demand levels using the National Forest Inventory data and also the National Census data based upon the per capita fuel wood requirements. We brought the spatial explicitness in terms of assessment of the supply demand and estimated what is the extractions on unsustainable basis, leading to degradation. The first cut level assessments are available. We are trying to refine further. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Okay, Murthy, sorry to interrupt you again. Still, I think we need to move on.
Yeah, you can move this slide. I already explained. You can move on this. Next slide, please.
What I
Next
is that we very quickly hand over to your colleague from the government to ask him whether he also wants to add a word on this.
I will take half a minute.
Because we just have another 15 minutes left,
fine?
and it would be great to have some time for also discussing questions.
So how much time till I take? Half a minute? Is it okay?
Excuse
Or
me?
shall I go to last slide?
The last slide. That is a very good idea. Let's look directly at the conclusions.
Similar.
Challenges that are very useful.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you can go to next slide. Next. Yeah, one of the challenges here is one of the challenges is we have very good data for 2010, but our reference year is 2000. The quality of databases are a little difficult. So we are trying to struggle to see how we reconstruct the difference between the changes happening between 2000 and 2010. Another important thing is the community forestry is the major stay. How effective the community forestry is responsible for bringing enhancement in the carbon. We were trying to do that, but we do not have a concurrent measurements at different community forestry sites, but we have a limited sites information, trying to link with remote sensing. Then we are also trying to get a framework how these different community forestry measurements can be scaled into a national system. And then another last point is we are working with a NASA survey program and Silva Carbon. The Department of Forestry is trying to develop an annual national forest monitoring system using remote sensing and the community forestry. In the coming 1.5 years, we are expecting that a periodic national monitoring system would take place, which would help the REDD monitoring systems. Thank you very much.
Dr. Murthy, very much. It's again very interesting to listen to you. I get the impression you're one of the MRV wizards, and there is an incredible depth of knowledge on the technical ins and outs and details of those national forest monitoring systems, about REDD+ reference levels, and hopefully in the future also about REDD+ results reporting. So that is excellent. And I've heard from the colleagues at FAO that they work together with the team in Nepal. That is indeed a very rewarding experience to carry out this work together. So thank you very much for sharing some of the lessons learned and some of the experiences and some of the ongoing work really in the country with everyone this morning. We have a few minutes left. And I'm sorry that I have to rush things a little bit, but we have some very interesting panelists that I'd like to introduce, and we have some very relevant questions that have come in that we can take about 10 to 15 minutes to discuss these. But yes, I also encourage everyone to continue asking questions in the chat window. I have a bunch of issues here, but maybe I managed to squeeze in 1 or 2 things that are being typed into the chat window if you're fast. This, what you see here, that is today's panel. We have, of course, the speakers that we have before, so they can be asked questions in case you want to find out a bit more about the details of what happened in Uganda or in Nepal and Malaysia. Now would be a good time to ask these things. In addition, we have also Mohan Kudel, the coordinator of the reference level process in Nepal that works together with Dr. Murthy. In addition, we also have Julian Fox. Julian Fox sitting actually right next to me here. He's the Asia Pacific Regional Advisor at the UN REDD team at the FAO. He has also been a CTA in several countries working on these issues, and he can talk to us at a high level of detail about really the technical ins and outs of implementing this from the perspective of the international cooperation. This slide also shows Danai Maniatis from UNDP. She has had connectivity problems and is not able to join the session, unfortunately. We also have Marco van der Linden from the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. He's a senior carbon finance specialist at the World Bank, and he doesn't only work with the FCPF actually, but also with the Biocarbon Fund. Marco's connected from the Netherlands this morning. First thing I do is I will ask these two additional panelists, Julian and Marco, for a very brief round of reactions to the 4 presentations that we have heard. So I will hand over to Julian now, and afterwards to Marco for a few minutes, and then we will still have some time for asking questions, preferably, I suppose, to our country representatives that we have connected this morning. Julian, I hand over to you now. Please give us your 5 cents on the presentations that we have heard.
Thank you very much, Till. I'll be very brief because we have a short time for discussion. Just a quick overview. The main points I picked up: Malaysia, a wonderful trailblazer. I felt they conveyed the importance of really building REDD+ results reporting on national structures and national priorities within the flexibility of the modalities of the UNFCCC. And I think that's a lovely example where Malaysia has national priorities, national structures, and it's crafted its REDD+ results reporting very much in that context. The second point I picked up from Malaysia was that the technical assessment process of the convention was a wonderful capacity building element. And that's great to hear that Malaysia engaged in this for that reason, and that it has actually resulted in capacity building within the country. So thank you very much, Liz. That was wonderful. Xavier for Uganda, I think showed us the wonderful, as Till had said, the wonderful building blocks of reference emission level and its strong linkage with the National Forest Monitoring System, which provides the necessary information. And again, Xavier conveyed the importance of this permanent institutional arrangements within Uganda that can continue to produce REDD+ results in the future, which of course is necessary and required. Thank you for Dr. Murthy. He conveyed really probably the most complicated scenario in Nepal, and this complication comes from the fact that the main driver of deforestation is degradation, and this by its very nature is the most complicated activity to characterize and report on. And Nepal is attempting to do this through wood fuel supply models and other methods, and within the context of community forestry. So it's a complicated scenario, but Nepal has demonstrated the technical solutions that they're working on to construct their reference emission level. That is my 5 cents on the 3 presenters, and thank you very much for the wonderful country participation. And I will pass back to Till to pass to maybe the next panelist.
No, that is excellent. Thank you very much, Julian, for that quick reaction. Marco, would you please do the same for us? I can still see you as muted. Please unmute your microphone now. Marco, please give us your feedback. Please give us, give the presenters the feedback on everything that you have heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Till, and thank you very much to the presenters. I think that was very interesting. I think my main takeaway pretty much echoes what Julian was already saying. I mean, if we talk about, I think sometimes when we have these discussions about reference emissions levels, we're all technical people, and we tend to lose ourselves a little bit in some of the technical details and getting the perfect data. But we have to remember that with REDD, we're changing the way we have to look at this. I think in many of our countries we have experiences with national forest inventories in the past that happen every 10, 15 years, or maybe once some donor comes along. And what we're really trying to build here is a system where countries are able to report results on a regular basis, not just as a number that needs to go to the UN in a fancy report, but also as the basis for making decisions in your country about forest management and about how to implement your REDD strategy. So I was very encouraged by a lot of the presentations. Malaysia clearly, as Julian was already saying, is taking an approach very much based on its own needs. I think in the Uganda presentation it came out very strongly as well, where the design of the National Forest Monitoring System is supposed to give information on the strategy options and to make sure that the country can respond and learn from what's actually going on. And I think we saw the same thing in Nepal, where there was an emphasis on the cost and time effective National Forest Monitoring System. So again, I think it's very encouraging. I think in a lot of countries there's still a lot of things to think about how this exactly is going to work when some of the REDD financing is going to run out. But I think in general we're all going in the right direction. That was it, Till. Back to you.
Thank you, Marco. No, excellent, excellent. It's very useful to have these reflections from you as well as from Julian, of course, before to provide feedback to our panelists. We have a few minutes left that I want to use for a question each, maybe to our country representatives. And there have been a bunch of questions for Uganda. So Xavier, if I can please ask you to respond to some of these, that would be great. Please try to unmute your microphone again. These questions come from Neeff and also from Richard Metcalf that ask, well, what REDD Plus activities Uganda is contemplating and what the choice of pools is, and also what information informed these choices. And there's been a question also on the use of interferometric synthetic aperture radar. So Xavier, if you would please unmute your microphone again and give us an answer to these questions from Neeff and Richard, that would be excellent. Xavier, please.
Okay, you want me to respond just now?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you, and thank you for the two questions. If I could start with the shorter one, we have not used the INSA biomass assessment, but we have looked at what it can possibly do, and in our second iteration of the biomass assessment, we are looking at the possibility of using different tools, and possibly we think it might be one of them. Then on the choice of the REDD activities that we are looking on at the country, we are actually looking at all the 5 activities. Uganda is a small country, and we think different sectors of our economy require that all of them are considered. However, we will use a phased approach, and in the first phase of our submission, we have been considering deforestation, of course, because it is detectable. We have a reasonable series of data since 1990, and the technology has afforded us even to redo what we did manually in 1990s. And so that one is definitely going to be included. We are also considering forest degradation, partly because we have been assessing our national biomass for the purposes of energy supply from biomass since also 1990. And we have reasonable information that has been collected since that time, which we can use to do the initial estimate. And then we also have plans for improving the information required for assessing forest degradation. In particular, the components associated with the capacity to monitor through remote sensing, for example. Then we have also been considering conservation as part of our initial. We haven't completely concluded, but the evidence we currently have is that most of the conservation areas with the highest biological value are also located in our protected area system. And the protected area system has been keeping information for a long time, and its boundaries are clear. And so we think we have reasonable grounds and information to submit within the first phase of our reference level, a component on conservation. The component on sustainable forest management is interesting for our country and also the component on enhancement, but we think they may not necessarily be submitted in our first initial one, but they are certainly going to be included in our second. This is because we are still recompiling the information that is available for sustainable forest management and also reassessing the potential for enhancement, in particular, the potentials which are located in the trees and shrubs on land other than land which is forest. And so once we have clarified those kinds of internal exchanges, we shall, I think, include it in our second or third iteration of our reference level submission. So that's the short I can give on the two questions that were given to me. Thank you.
Xavier, thank you. Thank you. It's good to have, I guess, the opportunity for everyone to ask these questions and get a first-hand and immediate answer on this. I want to very quickly turn back to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who actually began asking a question to you also. But Elizabeth, rather than only asking you questions, I would hope that you can maybe turn this into a comment. Turn this into a comment and talk a little bit more about the case of Malaysia on, well, how the drivers of forest degradation will deal with in Malaysia. Maybe that illuminates also why you're particularly interested in how this happened in Uganda. And while you're speaking, there has been a question that I found very interesting, pre-submitted in the preparation of this webinar, that I think you're very well positioned to answer. And this is a question. I'll just read it out for you. Is it acceptable to use a portion of an area as a basis for reporting if you don't have countrywide assessments? And that issue of using, well, subnational forest reference levels is something that has created a lot of interested attention, at least on my own side, regarding what has been done in Malaysia. And you already talked about this, but maybe you can address that question very quickly also for the listeners this morning. Liz, please try and unmute your microphone again and give us some very brief reactions on these two issues, if you could, please. Thank you.
Yes, I'll go very quickly to deep forest degradation. Identifying forest degradation is a challenge, and we have identified our forest degradation is basically caused, it basically occurs in protected areas, and that is because of prolonged El Nino effects. That's what we can directly link, we can directly pick up. So that is what we are seeing for now. That's what I was interested to see, what was the driver in Uganda. Going back to your second question on whether a portion of a forest could be used in the absence of better data sets. Well, I think it is possible. It depends on how the subnational or reference level is constructed and what has been included. Having said that, I also believe a country should have a sense of what is the potential emissions in the other sectors, in the other areas, especially in terms of the activity that is being addressed. So it is actually how you construct your reference level and what is considered is more important than whether a portion or a big portion or a small portion. Phil?
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Again, it's very interesting for me to listen to this discussion. I wish we had a lot more time for this. We're just having this interactive part. But let me use the very little time that we had left to also turn back to the case of Nepal. And I can see in the chat window that a discussion has started on the issue of forest degradation. And that is, of course, one of the technical crunch issues that comes up not only in Nepal but really across the board in many of the submissions. And we here at the FAO are also working on this and trying to design approaches for countries to also take into account forest degradation, despite the technical difficulties.
Dr. Murthy, please talk to us a little bit about how you do that in Nepal. I've seen that you already began answering questions related to it in the chat window, but please, you would maybe you would be able to give everyone a very quick overview of why that is so difficult and how you deal with it in Nepal and what all of that means potentially also more generally for other countries. Dr. Murthy, please. Don't forget to unmute your microphone again. So we will unmute you now, but please give us just a brief reaction about the issue of forest degradation in the context of REDD+ and how you do it in your country. Thank you. Dr. Murthy, we can't hear you yet.
Yeah. At this moment, when we say forest degradation, we are focusing on carbon change. We are not trying to focus on species diversity or any other parameters. We are limiting to carbon change, and fortunately we have across certain community forestry areas, concurrent field measurements are available across the time frame, permanent sample plots. So we are trying to link this permanent periodic field plot data with different resolutions of remote sensing, and to estimate the carbon change wherever the forest remained as forest, but the carbon loss has occurred because of the removals. Once this model is developed, we are trying to also bring another higher scale model using 30-meter resolution data. At this moment, our model is working at sub-district level. This model only works if you have a two temporal field plot data, scalable using remote sensing. This is the immediate approach what we are following. But normally across the countries, people are using periodic crown density monitoring. Changes in the crown density indicates a qualitative degradation, but on ground, the change in crown density may not necessarily indicate the degradation. So one needs to verify, corroborate with ground data. And these are the two modes of approach what we are planning in the Nepal. Thank you.
Dr. Murthy, thank you. Thank you. I wish we had more time to continue discussing, but I'm afraid that we're getting to the end of the time allocated. What I'll do now is I'll wrap up. I'll very quickly project a couple of bullets that summarize what, from my point of view, may be the key conclusions or the key issues that we have been discussing about here. There could be a very different take on this, and maybe everyone who's been listening should formulate their own key conclusions. But these are 4 takeaway points that I have for myself. I will very quickly present these and then say a few words in terms of follow-up about this reference, forest reference levels and REDD+ results webinar, and I think we will then leave it at that. So in terms of conclusion points, you should all be able to see them on your screen now. One of the points that we observed that we all found very important that came through very clearly in Liz's presentation about Malaysia was the importance of building REDD+ results reporting and reference levels on national structures, national definitions, national administrative and jurisdictional arrangements, and according to national priorities. So this is not only an academic exercise, that is about crunching numbers and data, but this is about reflecting the piece of the national circumstances, international context in international reporting, and that is what really the value is of that process. Second point, what also came through very clearly in Alice's presentation was the importance of the technical analysis and technical assessment processes. There's a lot of focus on the number crunching and putting together the submissions, but what's equally important is the interactive exchange with international experts. And it's a huge opportunity to engage in these from the country level. And there are several persons connected to this webinar who don't only participate in these processes as those that propose the submissions to the international level, but also on the side of the international experts that then analyze and assess the submissions that other countries have delivered. And I want to remind everyone connected that there are these two sides, and those persons in the countries that work on putting together submissions have the opportunity to also be nominated by their countries to look at other countries' reports and submissions. And I want to remind everyone of that, that is an excellent exercise to be engaged in. Now, in the case of Uganda and Xavier's presentation, one point that came through very clearly was the importance of institutional arrangements. And that goes a little bit together with a few points that Liz made. We don't want to have an ad hoc, once-off academic exercise be carried out for these submissions, but this is about putting something into place that is more permanent, more ongoing, that is more sustainable in terms of the data aggregation and reporting processes that are attached to the reference level. So this is one of the keystones of at least our strategy at the FAO for trying to support capacity development processes in countries where we hope that these move beyond ad hoc exercises and more into something that is more permanent. And we try work on this, among other things, but largely through also supporting institutional arrangements and functional capacities, really, in the individual countries that we work together with. Clearly, REDD+ results reporting, REDD+ reference levels, and the policies and measures for reducing emissions need to relate very directly to the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, as well as to carbon stock enhancement activities. And that is one of the points that came through quite clearly when listening to the presentation from Nepal. So Dr. Murthy talked about the drivers of deforestation and how the REDD+ reference either relates to them or has trouble also relating to them for the granularity of data. Either way, that is a very important point because the more explicit forest reference levels and REDD+ results reports are on those issues, the easier it will be to really see impact also from the policies and measures that countries are implementing. So that is a fourth point that I put on the list of key conclusions. I will stop here. There will be lots of reactions. There will be lots of reactions from the panelists, from the presenters, also from the audience. The time is up. I invite everyone to provide feedback and further reactions by email to us. We will respond. The easiest way of doing is simply to hit the reply button on any of the emails that you received, and then your message will reach my inbox, and I will then be able to follow up. Also, this session has been recorded. We will distribute a YouTube link, a link to the YouTube video where you can look at this again. You may also be able or interested in sharing that link then with further colleagues that have not been able to log on this morning. But that will come through sometime during the next days. We will upload to YouTube and make the recording available. There will also be further events and further work from our side on these issues. There will very likely be a publication forthcoming very soon, a couple of months' time, about many of the issues related to updates for countries on forest reference emission level submissions, as well as REDD+ results reporting. There's a small paper forthcoming, and we're also considering to engage in a side event at the forthcoming COP, where these issues may be discussed and where several countries might present some of the experiences collected in a simulator format, what we have now here, but then in person, of course, because it will be a side event at the COP. Either way, for now, I say thank you very much to everyone who has presented. Thank you very much to our panelists that also contributed some views and feedback and some reactions. But most importantly, thank you to everyone who's connected and working on forest reference levels and on REDD+ results reporting. All of us, we hope that REDD+ will make a contribution to bettering the way forests are managed around the world. And REDD+ is an important part of the strategy that we all work on. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you very much for staying connected right through the very end of this webinar. Thank you very much, and I hope that we can stay in close touch on these issues. Thank you very much. Goodbye now, and I hope you all have a very good rest of your days.